We've seen many hidden secret underground facilities across the Resident Evil games, and many of them shared the same dark, greedy pharmaceutical and corporate science feel. But the ARK Facility in Resident Evil 9 looks nothing like them. Not scientifically, and neither in its architectural expression. We know the Arklay labs were built around the T-Virus, and Nest under Raccoon City was where Birkin made the G-Virus. But the ARK's real purpose is still a bit convoluted and obscure. Was Spencer actually getting close to a way to transfer human consciousness into new vessels, the way his 4-step master plan claimed? Or was that whole project a cover story from the start, hiding the Elpis project as a secret antivirus the entire time? How was Elpis developed and kept buried down here for so long? And what else was Umbrella doing in the decades before the world finally found it? So many questions are still left unanswered, and in this video we're exploring everything we know about this place so far. Oswell E. Spencer's ultimate goal was to engineer a human race devoid of imperfection, smarter, stronger, and completely resilient. Having witnessed the devastation of both world wars, he believed humanity's fragile nature would inevitably lead to its own self-destruction. This drove him to scour the planet for a solution to human evolution. His search led him to a remote village in Eastern Europe, where he encountered a woman named Miranda and her discovery of the megamycete. The mold possessed a very special trait. It could preserve human consciousness and memories within a biological database in its roots, while granting immense power to a select few genetically compatible hosts. However, it had a massive bottleneck. The megamycete was too complex to administer on a global scale. While Miranda only cared about a single use case, using those stored memories to rebirth her deceased daughter Ava, Spencer envisioned a forced evolution for the entire planet. For him, the mold was impractical. He abandoned the method, but not the ambition. Realizing that nature held these answers, he kept searching until he discovered the progenitor virus in Africa. Progenitor had the ability to aggressively rewrite DNA and select superior specimens. While the survival rate for natural exposure was astronomically low, it had one massive advantage over the megamycete. It was a virus. It could spread exponentially across the globe. To fund the astronomical costs of refining this virus, Spencer created the Umbrella Corporation. The public-facing bioweapons business was always a secondary means to an end. The true goal was always forced human evolution. To execute his vision, Spencer established a strict 4-step master plan. Step 1. Initiate the Wesker Children Project to artificially select and groom genetically superior candidates for evolution, while simultaneously engineering the T-Virus, a weaponized stable derivative of Progenitor, to fund the entire operation. Step 2. Construct the ARK Facility. This was designed as a sovereign ultra-secure vault to safeguard Umbrella's core research assets and data under Spencer's direct supervision, serving as his personal private laboratory. Step 3. Develop Elpis, a project shrouded in secrecy that the rest of Umbrella believed to be a final superweapon, but was actually a universal cure for every viral strain the company ever created. Step 4. Achieve the final culmination of his work: consciousness and memory transfer. By learning to migrate his mind into fresh, genetically engineered vessels, Spencer would ensure his own immortality, allowing him to rule as god over the newly evolved human race. Spencer had surpassed Miranda's methods, but he never forgot her core concepts. Instead of relying on the megamycete to store consciousness, he used the progenitor virus's unique ability to alter biological traits such as blood to pioneer his own experiments in mind transfer. To Spencer, this blueprint was pure science and progression, but for the rest of the world, the biological fallout of his experiments would manifest as a global crisis. And so it began. Umbrella launched the T-Virus and Wesker program simultaneously. For the Wesker project, children from genetically gifted parents were selected and systematically weeded out through a brutal process of artificial selection. Meanwhile, to refine the T-Virus, a weaponized synthetic version of Progenitor, Umbrella constructed its very first underground lab network in the Arklay Mountains during the 1960s. The contrast here was deliberate. Underground, the labs were dark, gritty, and strictly utilitarian. Above ground was Spencer's luxurious, architecturally elegant personal estate. But even this layer of isolation wouldn't suffice for long. Despite a benevolent public face, rival spies and corporate factions quickly realized what Umbrella actually was, triggering a shadow war of corporate espionage. When a black market syndicate known as the Connections began closing in, Spencer realized he needed an absolute sanctuary. The solution was the ARK Facility, built with such intense secrecy that even Umbrella's highest-ranking staff were left entirely in the dark. Constructed deep beneath the heart of Raccoon City, the ARK was designed to be Spencer's ultimate sovereign laboratory, completely insulated from the corporate warfare outside, and entirely hidden from prying eyes of the connections. Spencer was a man who deeply valued expensive aesthetics and luxury, but his early research installations never reflected his personal taste. Stripped of any artistic flair because it was merely a functional tool, the luxury was reserved exclusively for the mansion built above, where Spencer would actually reside when he visited. If you were to wonder how an Umbrella lab would look like if Spencer's wealthy artistic expression were applied directly to the science itself, the answer is the ARK. It was his personal sovereign sanctuary, and its design completely abandoned the old philosophy of the Arklay labs. The ARK was built sometime between the 1980s and the 1990s. It was a massive synthesis of mid-century industrial brutalism and state-of-the-art clinical isolation. It was designed for physical security and complete automation under the watchful eye of the NOAA artificial intelligence. Instead of the dark concrete and metal architecture of the Arklay labs, ARK introduced an absolutely clean and blinding sterile aesthetic. The facility used a stark high-contrast visual palette, a world of pristine clinical white wall paneling mixed with aggressive crimson red, similar to Umbrella's logo itself. Yet, Spencer's vanity ensured that this clinical void wasn't entirely soulless. Scattered through the pristine hallways and administrative rooms are unexpected artistic elements, ornate sculptures, classical decorations, and pieces of fancy high-end furniture. It creates a jarring in-game juxtaposition where horrific automated bioweapon testing happens right alongside the wealthy artistic decorations of an elite aristocrat. To understand the unique ego behind this design, you have to look at the simultaneous construction of the Nest facility. While the ARK was being hollowed out in total secrecy, Umbrella was concurrently building Nest to house William Birkin's G-Virus, a significantly more powerful, volatile, and experimental strain. Yet, despite housing a superior virus, Nest's architecture was that of a standard corporate flagship, modern, industrial, and clinical, but ultimately practical and built for employees. The ARK, by contrast, lacked any corporate restraint. It was architecturally tailored to Spencer's personal god complex. The upper administrative tier was likely the official entrance to the proper means. While we do know that the ARK was somewhere in the vicinity of the orphanage, and also had an entrance there, it is very likely that the actual entrance was somewhere else which Spencer himself or authorized staff would take. The actual entrance in the game manifests as a hidden heavy-duty industrial loading dock. This loading dock served as the physical hub for secretly cycling heavy equipment, supplies, and test subjects into the complex under the guise of standard logistics. The subsequent main hall sets the tone with the cold transition zone, decorated with the classical anatomical statue detailing the raw musculature and skeleton of a human body, a direct reflection of Spencer's obsession with physical evolution. The mid-level containment and research tier was where the brutalism shifted into a sort of a clinical paranoia, built specifically to handle and isolate volatile biological experiments, filled with pressurized sterilization chambers, ultra-sterile clean rooms, and automated cargo pods. The lower processing and disposal tier was the literal underbelly of the facility, regulating waste and power. This tier was dominated by the dump, a massive subterranean disposal yard. At the physical and functional core of this entire descending spiral lay the core, the central refinement system, codenamed Pandora. Hidden behind the main lobby, protected by mechanical failsafes and housing the central archives alongside Spencer's secret study, Pandora was the ultimate vault for his twilight years. The naming conventions and symbolisms throughout this deep descent were heavy with ancient mythology, directly mirroring Spencer's megalomania. The entire facility was governed by NOAA, a smart supercomputer named after the biblical patriarch who built an ark to preserve life and weather a world-cleansing cataclysm. Inside the Pandora core lay the Elpis project. In Greek mythology, when Pandora opened her box and unleashed all the world's evils, only Elpis, the spirit of hope, remained trapped inside. For decades, rival syndicates like the Connections believed Elpis was Spencer's ultimate biological weapon for mass destruction. But in truth, it was a universal cure designed to purge all his viral strains. It was Spencer's ultimate failsafe, the Hope, left inside his box of horrors to wipe the global state clean if his experiments ever spun out of his control. Bypassing the security ceiling, the archives and his personal office required the retrieval of simultaneous positioning of two highly specialized key items, the Noblesse Orb and the Animus Orb. Noblesse represents nobility and Spencer's belief in his own aristocratic sovereign right to rule over humanity, while the Animus represents the soul, the inner life force, and the unconscious mind, a direct nod to his obsession with memory and consciousness transfer. Yet, once you use these keys to step inside Spencer's private study, the bright white and red clinical look of the facility vanishes completely. Tucked away at the absolute center of this automated high-tech fortress is a room with a classical wooden aesthetic. It is the ultimate manifestation of his psyche. No matter how deep he pushed into cold futuristic science, Spencer's personal comfort remained completely anchored in old-world European luxury. To make the sovereign fortress work, Spencer built it directly under the Raccoon City orphanage, which was a dark screening ground for his earliest eugenicist experiments. This tier was ultimately used to harvest and process test subjects for the final step of Spencer's master plan. This consciousness transfer initiative was the true secret of the Deep Vaults, the ultimate project that rival syndicates constantly confused with Elpis. Because the raw progenitor virus was lethal to the vast majority of living organisms, Spencer's researchers needed genetically flawless specimens to survive the optimization process. A massive batch of genetic clones, the Series 60 trials, were manufactured and stored here, subjected to relentless trial and error testing until the researchers could successfully stabilize a vessel. Spencer quietly drove this project forward in total isolation. Throughout its entire operational history, other than a few higher researchers, virtually no one within Umbrella knew this facility even existed. Even top-tier executives who were fully read in on Umbrella's illegal bioweapons trade were kept completely in the dark. The only exceptions to this information vacuum were Spencer's personal security forces. To maintain absolute secrecy and prevent internal corporate espionage, Spencer bypassed standard corporate guards entirely, utilizing a highly vetted closed-loop contingent of the Umbrella Security Service. Umbrella carried out decades of horrific genetic experimentation until the fateful day of the Raccoon City outbreak finally arrived. By now, the Connections knew very well what they stood to gain if they stole Umbrella's work, especially Elpis, what they believed to be Spencer's ultimate biological weapon. When the T-virus in Raccoon City spread uncontrollably, it was moving too fast for any normal containment protocol to suppress it. The Connections saw their opportunity. Under the guise of protecting the world from the outbreak, the Syndicate used their deep cover links within the United States government to actively lobby for and order the thermal destruction of Raccoon City. This manipulation was executed so that Umbrella would be thoroughly exposed and ruined, leaving no one left to interfere with their corporate takeover. While the surface of the city was completely vaporized, the massive subterranean ARK Facility sat abandoned and ripe for the taking, completely safe from the blast deep within its natural foundations. They followed through with the plan. Umbrella was found guilty in court and legally dissolved in 2004, officially ending their global operations. With Spencer fleeing to his isolated estate in Europe, the Connections quietly moved into the ruins to begin their takeover of the ARK Facility. Their plan was to seize and reactivate its highly automated labs, turning the bunker into a dark North American logistics hub to manufacture and traffic illegal bioorganic weapons back onto the global black market. They specialized in cataloging and upgrading older Umbrella projects, such as the massive Garmer dogs derived from the Cerberus line, the volatile liquor Beta 2 strains, and the modified T501 Tyrant. The weapons themselves were stored directly below in bioweapon repositories. These rooms functioned as the Syndicate's high-tech stock rooms. But while the bioweapons trade funded their operations, their primary objective for occupying the ARK was always to breach the deepest vault and secure Elpis. This is where they hit a wall. The facility's infrastructure was entirely governed by AI, which managed the automated security grid. The AI was hard-coded to completely purge and destroy the Elpis data if any incorrect terminal password was entered, forcing the Connections to hold off on brute-forcing the network. By 2023, long after Spencer had died, the Connections were still secretly guarding and operating the ARK, in a shadow partnership with corrupt elements of the US government. Even as mysterious black market bioweapons kept popping up worldwide, the facility remained entirely undetected until the BSA finally uncovered its existence. The Alliance immediately put the subterranean complex under active surveillance, but for 3 long years, they completely failed to launch a successful raid or seize the asset. The upgraded biological strains being manufactured inside were simply too powerful for standard BSA tactical teams to overcome. This defense was anchored by the Connection's Elite Guard, a private Black Ops security force modeled directly after Umbrella's old USS squad. The Elite Guard heavily fortified the facility's checkpoints, turning the upper administrative tier into an impenetrable armored bottleneck. But now that we know all that, we still don't really know what happened with Spencer's mind transfer experiments, or whether they were even real at all. Did they even exist from the start, or was it all a ploy for the sole purpose of disguising Elpis? Dr. Victor Gideon spent a massive portion of his life following his memory consciousness transfer project. This was the exact obsession driving his horrific experimentation at the Roseville Chronic Care Center, harvesting blood properties and creating genetic clones like Emily and Marie. Looking at these clones, we have clear evidence that Spencer was genuinely trying to get his consciousness transfer to work. The problem was that getting progenitor to accept a specific genetic host without triggering lethal mutation was exceptionally rare. The only way to bypass those odds was through mass cloning. But they just couldn't get this to work. Every single subject suffered acute genetic rejection and severe mental degradation. So did Spencer ever actually reach step 4 of his master plan? The canonical answer is no, unless Capcom has more surprise waiting for us in the future titles. When Albert Wesker finally confronted Spencer at his European estate in 2006, Spencer had become a fragile, decrepit old man hooked up to medical life support tubes and confined to a wheelchair. History often remembers Spencer in those final moments as a senile, rambling megalomaniac, sitting in his grand estate clinging to delusions of grandeur, while preaching to Wesker about his divine right to become a god and rule over a superior species. Step 4 failed because Spencer simply ran out of time. His physical body decayed faster than his science could ever advance. Between the Connections infiltrating his networks to scavenge his research, and Wesker abandoning Umbrella's vision to pursue Ouroboros, Spencer's sovereign empire crumbled around him before he could ever migrate his mind. This is where the narrative pivot of Elpis comes into play. Since Resident Evil 9 simply glosses over Spencer's sudden remorse, it leaves it open-ended whether he actually had other motivations for creating Elpis. Here is what I believe Spencer's true motives were or could have been. Originally, under Spencer's master blueprint, Elpis and his mind transfer protocol were meant to work in tandem. Elpis was supposed to be a cleanup tool, a way for God Emperor Spencer to wipe away the chaotic mutated biological weapons he used to fund his empire, leaving behind a clean slate for his evolved Wesker humanity. When Step 4 stalled out completely and his body began to fail, it stopped being an imperial tool and became the ultimate dead man's switch, a manifestation of pure corporate spite. Spencer was never a penitent old man looking for forgiveness or seeking to make amends for his sins. He was a textbook narcissist. He didn't view his bioweapons as a moral atrocity. He viewed them as his personal intellectual property. When he realized he was dying, that his Wesker subjects had betrayed him, and that rival syndicates like the Connections were circling like vultures to steal his life's work, his ego refused to accept it. His mindset was simple. If he couldn't become a god and rule over humanity, then no one else could. Elpis was designed as a giant mechanical middle finger to the entire bioweapons underworld. Spencer knew that if his competitors got their hands on an antiviral cure, they wouldn't use it out of goodwill, engineering new viruses, spreading them across the globe, and selling the cure back to the very people they infected. To prevent anyone else from finishing his research or monetizing his legacy, Spencer weaponized Elpis to completely devalue the global black market BOW trade by rendering all progenitor and T-virus strains inert. If Elpis was meant to destroy his competitor's business, why put a password self-destruct on the terminal? Why not just program Noah to automatically release the cure the moment Spencer died? The answer lies in Spencer's unyielding need for absolute control and gatekeeping. Spencer was not an anarchist. He was an aristocrat who believed in sovereign ownership. If the AI automatically released the cure, humanity would win by default, and his rivals would eventually pivot to new pathogens. Spencer refused to give the world a free victory. By programming the terminal to wipe the Elpis database if an incorrect password was entered, he constructed a psychological bear trap. He paralyzed the Connections for over 2 decades. They held a physical facility, but they were too terrified to touch the keyboard because a single wrong guess would delete the prize forever. He essentially trapped them in a cage of their own greed, forcing them to waste millions of dollars chasing a red herring by trying to clone a completely normal orphan girl, Grace Ashcraft, whom Spencer framed as a genetic key. The password structure was also Spencer's final arrogant filter of the worthy. He hid the password Hope inside a philosophical unreleased media interview he gave to Alyssa Ashcraft in 2006. He knew his competitors would never look there. They would be guessing virus codes, project dates, or genetic sequences. The system was designed so that only someone who truly understood his grand vision could ever unlock it. Anyone else would trigger the failsafe and destroy the data, proving to Spencer from beyond the grave that they were unworthy to inherit his Earth. The Pandora core was actually very true to its ancient myth. Hope was trapped inside the box at the bottom of the subterranean bedrock, unreachable by the wicked, guarded by the ghost of a dying tycoon who chose to burn his own empire to the ground rather than let anyone else wear his crown.
The right to be a god.